Hi, it's Rhiannon Faith, and I want to tell you a story. It's been a bit since I've shared anything, but not for any dramatic reason other than obvious life busyness, and did some travel, got away and relaxed and enjoyed some time on the beach with my fantastic fiance and some quiet reflection with God. It was really just a powerful time to recharge and replenish, and so it was great. But I just really had on my heart to share with you, and so I hope you enjoy. While I was out and traveling, one of the things that came to mind was this sort of trend or observation of trend, where when I am out and about, I love to take photos, and so I take certain photos over and over and over again. I don't just mean that I click the shutter 100 times, but there's a certain photo that I always capture, at least one when I'm out and about, and there will be certain times when I'm out and about and I just random, gone to the store or something, and I'll see it and I'll take that photo. And so that's cryptic, but the photo is from the vantage point of being underneath the canopy of a tree and looking up through the branches to the sky, or seeing the sun burst through, sometimes the stars, but often this picture is in my reel from things that I have taken along the way. And I had a handful of them this last time. There were all these magnificent trees and different types of trees and perspectives to capture, and so I did that. And it got me thinking about why I do that, of course. What is the behind the scenes on that? And it's not like I had to really think about it for a long time, but I think we all have some place, or hopefully we all do, some specific place in our minds that we would go to when we need to refresh our soul, or feel replenished or at peace. That quiet place when you go in for an MRI and they tell you, be calm, think of your happy place. So my happy place takes me back to high school, which is an odd time to find a happy place. I'll admit that, acknowledge that oddity. But we lived in this house. We moved to it my freshman year, in February of my freshman year, which was, back in the day, early 90s. And so at this house on Twin Oaks Valley Road in San Marcos, California, it was a small, old, built in the 20s, maybe even started before then, house that sat mostly middle set in 10.5 acres that were largely underdeveloped or utilized in any kind of meaningful way. Mostly just overgrown with ticks and other awful things. Large grass, whatever. Just places I generally didn't venture. But on the property, we spent a lot of time refurbishing and upgrading and doing all sorts of projects around the home. My dad was an architect and had worked in construction, had his own firm for a bit, and so this was like his playground to be able to do all of these things. Or, and many times you take your work home. But we had all these little showcase projects in the house, and my dad and I were always really close, and so anytime my dad was working on a project, I was working on a project. My sister somehow got out of that a lot of the time. She was with my mom instead in the house doing whatever else. But if we were landscaping or refinishing something, somehow I was always voluntold to participate. So I had some legitimate blood, sweat, and tears in all of those projects myself. And I can't really talk about the house without talking about this one really sweet moment that we had. And there were, as any house, very polarizing and distinctly different types of experiences in that house. Maybe on a scale more dramatic than most. But one of those moments that was really cool was in the summer one year, and I don't recall which. We probably did it more than once. But one particular time, we were just dying in the house. It was so hot. We had no insulation, so in the summer it was baking, and in the winter it was freezing, like bone-chilling cold. It was not great. But in the summer, this one summer, it was so hot and it was humid. In San Diego, lots of places don't have air conditioning, and so this is a common tale, but most places have insulation. This, again, did not. So my dad got this brilliant idea, let's just take it outside. So we carried the couch and the side tables, and I think even a lamp. I mean, we full set up the living room on our front walkway, patio, lawn, just full living room setup, front lawn, which, by the way, totally visible from the street. So that was kind of weird. But we pulled the TV out front and sat it in the doorway because that was the extent to which we could stretch and make that work. And we watched a movie on the lawn, and it was the coolest thing. And my parents did lots of cool, weird things like that as I was growing up. Like, whose parents pull all the furniture out onto the lawn to watch a movie? It was a necessity because of the heat, but I don't know that everybody would have been comfortable with that level of my comfort is more important than the potential embarrassment. But my dad was solid with those sorts of things. So we watched the movie out on the lawn, and I thought to myself in that moment, what a cool and special, fun thing. Totally random, super weird, but also very awesome. So that was just one little snippet, but I can't talk about that house without mentioning that. At that house, we had lots of overgrowth of plants and trees, and there was this just massive rose bush nightmare in the front yard that we eventually hacked back down to nothingness. But there was this extraordinary tree, which when we first moved there, honestly, not extraordinary, kind of gross. The whole thing had just been so unmanaged and uncared for that it was growing, the branches were almost growing down onto the ground and back up again, and they were everywhere, and it was this just insane mess of tree. And we had some dear family friends, and the dad husband, Paul Pate, was an absolute wizard with landscaping, and he got out there like a total madman and went to town on this tree and just absolutely beautifully shaped it, bringing up all of those low branches, cutting them off. At one point, I remember that he was, because he was a wild one. He was dangling, so he had his legs looped around a branch, was dangling upside down with the chainsaw, cutting a branch beneath, because that was the best vantage point. I don't know, that would not be for me. But he was amazing, and he is amazing, but he did this amazing thing to this tree. And so the finished product had this really spectacular canopy that came out all around the tree base. And so my dad flung up a porch swing, and it was an extra wide, extra long porch swing, or maybe I was a whole lot smaller, probably a little of both. And so the porch swing was on there, and what was so great about it is because it was looped to one of the lower branches, which was now roughly 20 feet from the ground, it had this really slow and methodic movement when you sat on it. And so I would go out there all the time and just lay on the porch swing, looking up through the canopy of the tree. And beneath the tree, on the ground, we had put this beautiful extension of grass all the way out, at least 10 feet from the base in every direction. And then underneath the porch swing, there was red wood chips in this beautiful rectangle sitting beneath, just slightly extra wide, so you wouldn't mess up the grass. And so sometimes I would lay on the grass, but most of the time I would lay on the porch swing, and it would be this sweet combination. I mean, I can even smell it as I think of it, of the wood chips and the freshly mowed grass, that sweet smell as they combined, and the freshness, and then just the majesty of the stars as you looked up through the canopy. And that place, that spot, was such a place of peace and comfort. And there were, as I said, many times at that house that were challenging or hard. And so I would find myself, marched out to that tree and under that tree in that swing. And I don't remember very many times where I allowed anybody else on the swing when I was on the swing. So I was kind of a swing hoarder. That was my space. That was my happy place. And legitimately, there were times when, after my sister and I switched rooms, where I would climb out my window, first floor, and go over to the swing just to have that experience, get a grip, kind of regroup, get my head on straight. Shocking that there would be stress and anxiety and weirdness and distance as a teenager. How odd. But through all of those things that would come up, that tree, that base, that home plate, and special place, that was right there. And so the thing that I loved the most about all of that is how I'd feel when I was there. I recognized the vastness of God, the goodness of God. And as I peered up through the canopy and could see the stars, or in the day, the sunbursts of light as it cut through the leaves and the branches, I recognized the smallness of me and the limitation of my view of circumstances. And so while whatever I was facing in a moment was heavy or challenging, I was reminded of the perspective that I have and its limitation, that it's just this narrow view that I have available to me compared to the fullness of the story and the awareness of all that's going on around me. And so I somehow, that experience, and even reflecting on that experience still all these years later, helps me to feel more at peace and filled with comfort and really kind of elation that, good night, how amazing to have that experience, to be able to lay there and just be quiet and still with God. And I can think of just countless moments where I was happy, excited, and I ran to the tree. Or I was sad and overwhelmed and I ran to the tree. And I think the tree became like a physical manifestation of my connection with God. I was a journaler even back then, although most of those journals honestly should just be burnt because yikes. I needed a place, it was my sanctuary, to go and feel the presence of God. And I, of course, felt God's presence other places as well. But ever since then, as I was continuing on in life and into adulthood, the thing that always mattered more to me, although I didn't always have, the thing that mattered most to me in a house was what was happening on the outside. I wanted that outside to be an extension of the house, and the house that I have now really has that in it. I don't have a big tree yet, but it does have that expansion of the living area out into the outdoors. And I love that feeling of just being able to connect with God and being outside. And so why did all of that come up? Well, again, that tree perspective, looking up through the base and that canopy and seeing the stars or seeing the light reflect through and flicker, it is a perspective I don't ever want to lose. And every time I take one of those pictures, I really feel this excitement and peace and comfort. It's like a hug or a visit from an old friend, where I remember how good that was and how good that felt. And I know that because it's in a memory and now I have it in tons of photos, I can be there again. And it's interesting, I guess, although not all that obscure, that my favorite painting of all time is Georgia O'Keeffe's The Lawrence Tree from 1929. And it is the perspective of looking up through the canopy of a tree. And it's brilliant and beautiful, and I love it. And I resonated with that photo the moment I saw it. And I don't actually remember whether I saw it before or after we moved to that house. But when I first kind of knew in recollection of being under that canopy once it was ready or done, it was like being home, like coming home, but I had seen it before. It was the most peculiar thing, but I recognized it right away. And so that I've always had this really strong connection back to that painting. And I probably will never be able to afford to have a real replica of it, although I'm sure I could get a lithograph or something. But my mom is a really talented artist, and she probably wouldn't tell anybody that. In fact, she always downplays those things, but she's really, really talented, and particularly talented in copying things. So she can take a photo or a photograph or a piece of artwork or whatever, and she can replicate it really pretty accurately. And there's always a twist of her in it, which is a beautiful thing as well. But she made one for me, a replica of the Lawrence tree for Christmas one year, and painted it for me on a canvas. And it's one of my most cherished gifts because, well, she made it, which always, of course, means more, but it's my happy place. And it reminds me of that happy place and the peace that God can bring in the midst of situations. And I don't know how much I fully understood how he would meet me in that place and how that was during all of those times, how much I needed that. I mean, I craved that time. And it wasn't always because I was in desperate need of comfort or whatever, but it was my safest place, and I always felt his presence. Although, again, I don't know that I would have articulated it in that way, but anybody who came to my house, it was right away, let me take you to the tree. Let me show you the tree. And it wasn't far off from the house either. It was right there, but that was my place. And so, like, if you got to be a part of seeing the tree, you were definitely in my fold of favorite people. And because it was my favorite place, and I wanted to share it with everyone. And my sister and I, a number of years ago, when we were back in San Marcos visiting or whatever, maybe she wasn't with me, I don't know, we went in to explore, and the property is now a nursery. And I cannot tell, because they have spectacularly grown trees in every direction, whether the tree is still there. And I guess it's better that I don't know, because if it's not, that would be sort of sad. But it lives forever in my heart and in my memories. And I just can't say enough. I'm so bonded to trees. It started there, I think. It might have started sooner. But if you don't have a place, a special place that gives you hope and peace and joy, I would encourage you to find it or reflect back and consider those places that have brought you those feelings of peace and comfort. And I don't know who needed to hear that or wanted to hear that story of comfort and peace, but I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm sure there will be more stories to come. So come back again and I'll tell you another story.